Hey there, Cindy Daychuk with Queen Bee Creations. I get a lot of people asking me about layering color, especially on a piece. So how to be able to get a colorful piece, but that doesn't look too out of control or too garish. And so because that's what I was planning on doing with this piece, I thought that I would kind of give you a little bit of a walkthrough as I go so you can see how I do it. And really the plan is for all these colors to be on there. So mostly we're gonna have this is all DIY clay-based paint that I'm using for this. And so we're gonna have the Queen Bee, which is kind of this golden yellow, this Kissing Booth, which is a bit of a fuchsia pink, Cowgirl Coral, self-explanatory, in all of these kind of carved details. And then we're going to have the marquee, the red, along with some old school, which is a rich dark gray, and sea glass, which is a bright turquoise in around the body of it all. I swear it's gonna work because we're mostly using the bright colors on the base, and then some of the over colors are going to be in our second coat, and we'll distress back to see some of the other colors, but they're not going to be all a total mishmash completely, if that makes sense to you. So to start, I have these three colors, the three undercoat colors, on a little plate. And what I'm going to be doing is kind of dipping my brush in both and taking it down a lot of those details. Okay? So I'm just looking at getting some of this color on right now. And there's not really a lot of magic to it, although there is a little bit of a thought process in terms of maybe where I want some of the colors being layered. But as with all things, I reserve the right to change my mind down the road. And we're just kind of going to continue that process along each of these. I am going to be adding a little bit of the coral in. The three colors on my brush is a little bit crazy making. And you'll see that I just kind of keep flipping my brush around depending upon the direction to kind of keep them lined up a little bit here. And having to go over it a little bit because there's a lot of detail on these pieces here. I've got my pink and my yellow on, I'm going to go and add in a bit of coral. And I'm just going to do this along my top edge. And a little just in this mid section. So again, no big special worries here. It definitely looks like a mishmash. I get that. But we haven't started layering on color over top yet. So we're looking at getting some of that base color on there that we're going to be painting over top of and that we're going to use to kind of have peeking through and adding a little bit of dimension. So it's not going to be a sedate piece when it's done, but it's not going to be totally wild. It's just going to be a little bit fun, a little bit funky, and definitely more than one color. Now we still have some sections without paint. So I'm taking the same brush, I just kind of wipe it off on my drop cloth, which is why my drop cloth ends up covered in paint. And we're gonna add in a little bit of other color. So we're adding in a little bit of red. Okay, so we've got our marquee red, we've got some of that going on. And again, just adding it kind of loosely here and there. Sides, across a little bit. So we've got our red. I want to take our red across the base. This is definitely going to be boho, so bear with me. All right, and now just clean that off a little bit. And we're going to take some of that. Okay, so we've got some of that turquoise, that sea glass going down into the middle. And again, I'm using the same brush because this is just my base coat, right? I don't need the purity of the colors just yet. I'm just looking to get some paint on every surface so that I have a base to come back in and work from. Okay? And then I'm going to do just some touches of my old school here and there. Okay, and that's our base coat. Hang in there with me, guys. It'll be okay. So I'm just gonna do the same thing, add the red and the blue to the other side. I'm gonna let this schmozzle all dry, and then we're gonna come back and we're gonna do our top layers and start adding in some of what the finished colors are gonna look like a little bit more. See you soon. Know that the rule is typically wax is the last thing that you apply, but I am actually applying some clear wax. I've got the DIY clear wax to all of the moldings. I want to create a bit of a barrier when I put the next layer of paint on to ensure that I'm able to distress back and get some of this color back. So just where all the moldings are, I'm just adding a little bit of that wax. You can see how it darkens it out. And I'm going to let it dry overnight before I add any more layers on, just to help my next layer of paint stick a little bit better so that really I only get some of this color coming through where I want, where I'm going to be distressing. So it's a little trick. I know that it goes against the rules, but you know, sometimes rules are made to be broken, and really, it's no different. I mean, you could put a layer of poly on if you wanted to then be able to paint over top of as well, just to create a bit of a barrier. So I'm just using some wax, which will make it a little bit easier, but we're just going to paint over that afterward. So I'll come back at you when we're ready to do that. We're now ready to start putting on a bit of a top coat. So it's going to be more subdued, but it's still going to be kind of colorful. So we're not going shy. And so I have 4 colors. It's a reduction, 4 colors. I have DIY Old 57 and DIY Sea Glass. And then I have, which red am I using? Marquee. I've got Marquee and Old School. So you can see just a little bit of this. But what I'm looking at doing is, and I also have my water bottle. So I am looking at kind of two-toning it a little bit again. So fitting my blues in here. And you remember that we waxed over top of a lot of this molding here. So when we did that, what we were doing was making it a little bit easier for us to distress. Now, what I am trying to do is get a little bit more of that blue paint, right, of the sea glass down into the crevices, because when I waxed, I didn't necessarily stick the wax down that far. I was looking to get more of the color that's going to sit down nice and low, and then I'll be able to distress back to the colors that were sitting up on top of this molding. That's the plan. So really what I'm looking to do to begin with is just get some of this color on, and then I may need to go back in to get some of that lower detail with some of those colors. But it's just kind of rocking the brush back and forth. Tends to do it. So I'm looking at getting a lot more of this blue happening up in here and up in here. I am going to keep kind of the red in between, and I will use some of that old school, that gray, to kind of add a little bit of the accent color, which I could just not do and maybe add black wax later. So see how I felt about it, maybe do the black wax. That would also work. So I'm using the same brush here because I really don't mind if I get some of the two turquoises blending. That would be fine. And my paint is kind of right at the end. Right at the end of the jar, so it's a little bit tougher. But a little bit of water and DIY paint moves wherever you want. Right? All right, we've got all of our blues on. Now it's time to add some of our red. And we're using the DIY marquee, and I'm just going to be kind of loosely adding it in. Now, I am deliberately getting a little bit of overlap, unblended overlap, just because I like that streakiness. And because I know that I'm going to be doing a lot of sanding on this piece. So what I did decide is that I'm not going to add the gray in there. I am probably going to do the gray along the edge and down along the bottom, and then I'll maybe add some black wax in on the piece where I need some of that aging and to pull some of that darker color down. So I'm deliberately doing this really loose. This is not a precise piece. Okay, I want to get some of that, and probably after we've distressed, what I'll likely do is then come back in and add some blue streaks in the red and some red streaks in the blues, just to be able to create a little bit of balance. So This is all that we're doing for this coat. All right, we've got a little bit of a three-sided action going on here. This is where we're going. This piece has got some, this has been distressed, it's got some clear wax on, it's got some dark wax. This section has gotten some dry brushing and some distressing done. This piece has nothing. So I'm going to show you, show you each of the steps to get to here as we go. The top, by the way, I keep debating. I am thinking I'm just going to add a lot more of the old school gray on top. I've added some and toned it down. I'm debating whether or not I can tone it down a little bit more with just the black wax. I'm waiting to see once this is done. But you can see that it gets much darker and more aged looking. We've got the little black knobs that will go in here as well to tie it in. But this has got the dry brushing and distressing and the wax. And you can see how much detail comes out just from doing some of the wet sanding. So we are doing, let me grab my brushes here, because we're adding just a bit of, you can see I'm just reactivating. So this is the DIY paint. I've got some red that had dried on there. So I'm just reactivating it and grabbing some of the blue. So you can see that I have dry brushed a little bit of the old 57 here, and I've dry brushed a little bit of the red in here, just so that it's not so stark a contrast. So to do that, oh my brushes have dried up just a little bit. So to do that, I just have a little tiny chip brush. I'm kind of reactivating. I'm wondering if that's the red or if that's the pink now, actually. So let's just get a bit of red just in case. Okay, let's do the red instead. Oh yeah, that was the pink. All right. So we're just kind of lightly rubbing some of this in here so that, again, it's not such a stark contrast. And we're going to do a little bit of sanding there anyway. But I didn't want the purity of those colors. I really wanted it looking very rustic and kind of aged and painted multiple times and all that kind of fun stuff. All right, so that's enough of the red. We don't need a lot, so just little bits. Now my blue is pretty grungy, actually. Obviously dried out from when I did the other. So I'm just wetting it and then rubbing it off onto my dry cloth to kind of bring my brush back. Perfect. Now I just need to open this. Yeah, here it is. And I don't need a lot of these, and that's one of the main things to bear in mind. I'm just looking to drag a little bit of that color in. So you can see I'm just kind of dipping into the can lid. Let's get rid of this guy. And then pretty much wiping it off. But just to be able to add a little bit of that blue over top of the red, so the red is not so stark. And it's not even, it's just hints of it here and there, some places heavier, some places lighter. But we're just pulling some of the blue to the red and some of the red to the blue. And that's all I need on that. So just a bit to add a hint. Now, let me get the paint can closed before I knock it over and sit in it because it wouldn't have been the first time. All right, so I am just going to wet distress these raised areas. I will dry sand these sections once that paint is a little bit dry. But what I'm looking at doing is just taking that cloth and rubbing back to reveal some of those other colors. So I'm pulling out the pinks and that coral and some of that yellow that are hiding underneath, and a little bit of the edging. And you'll recall that we had put a little bit of wax down on this to be able to help with this process. We knew that we were going to be distressing and pulling these colors back up. And it highlights these details just wonderfully. So you could use just simply a wet cloth. You don't have to use wet wipes. I just get tired of washing everything, so I at least wash my brushes out. But this is just easier. So I like a little bit of the edging in here, so highlighting some of that. I'm bringing out the details here. We're looking at doing that so that we can get to this, right? Pull you just a little bit round over here, and you can see that I've already got these pieces distressed. So I've got some of the blues glazing here, and I have some of that distressing happening. And what we're looking at doing now is waxing this. So let me show you on this how we get over to here. So I'm taking just my clear wax. So I've just got DIY clear wax, my wax brush, and I'm just going over all of the piece. And you can see how it instantly darkens those colors and brings them back a little bit more to their true color, right? And here, I'm using a brush and not a rag to apply the wax. You can usually use a rag, but I've got a lot of detail and a lot of crevices that I have to get down into. And to do that, I really need to be having a brush. I just have a little flat wax brush that I do that with. I don't need a lot of wax. It can go really far, but I'm just looking at getting that color on and swirling it down into those crevices. And it immediately darkens it. So you can see here, I don't know if you can see, I can see, it darkens it, but it lightens up again as it starts to dry. Now we're gonna be adding a little bit of black wax to it as well, because I want to have a little bit of that darker aged look to it, in addition to kind of darkening to this. I wanted it a little bit of a colorful, but muted colorful and a little bit moody kind of look, if a piece of furniture can be moody. If I can be moody, I guess my furniture can be moody, right? Now, I don't want the black wax everywhere. And so I take a little tiny brush and I have a little tiny dab of black wax on it. And I'm just going to dab it in a couple of places and then just kind of rub it down in. So it's just giving a little bit of depth, a little bit of aging, right, to it, darkening the piece out a little bit, making it a little bit more moody, but a little bit more character in there too. I want it to look gold. And that's what the black wax is doing. But because I'm applying it right after the clear wax, it's really moving along fairly well, because I haven't wiped any of my black wax back yet. And so, any of my clear wax, sorry, back yet. So it's allowing the black wax to move a little bit more readily or easily than it might have otherwise. And here, I want to smooth out that definition of that a little bit. So I'm just taking my clear wax brush again and wiping it down. So I don't need it everywhere. And it might seem like it, but right now I haven't re-dipped this brush, so it doesn't have very much on there. And that's enough. That works for me. I do want to get some of my wax working up here though. And down along the bottom. Now, the bottom I distressed already, and it's got a lot of those corals in it. A lot of just that dark old school gray down at the bottom. I'm loving all of the color variation on this piece. But I love how we've done it rather than in super bright, in very muted tones. So it has a little bit more of that old world Mexican kind of look. So that's how we're taking the plain to this, which is now up to this. This side is dry. I'm gonna finish off this piece, this section, distressing it and getting it all waxed up and letting the wax harden overnight so then I can buff it. I am going to be adding some wax to this, maybe a little bit of more gray, so it's not such a contrast to the trim. So doing a lot more of the dark gray, sanding it back, and then doing the same wax treatment to the top. So being able to do the clear and a little bit of the black wax, so tone it down a little bit, but I'm gonna get that done and get it buffed. A little bit of the hardware added on, and we'll see what it looks like when it's finished. Let me know what you're thinking. You'll see it all staged up and dressed up. It's still not its finished stage, but I'm loving this aged, layered look. So definitely give this a try, guys. Even if these aren't your colors, what I hope that you get from this is how to put on that color below in anticipation of revealing it at this stage, right? We had some pretty bizarre colors at the beginning that didn't look like it would match, but we're just getting hints of them out, right? Even in these dark areas where we've got little hints of that coral happening. So sometimes it's just about having kind of a bit of that finished idea in mind so that you put those colors on first so that you can reveal them at the end. It's a little bit backward thinking, but it really pays off dividends because you can't get this look by adding the color later. This look, you have to have been layering the color along the way. And if you don't end up liking it, then you just cover up those layers and nobody knows what's below it. So at the end of the day, it's just paint. You can't really mess it up. I promise. I'm gonna carry on and finish this up, and then we'll pull it together for a staged reveal and you can see what it looks like at the end.